fucking broke my Sitar, motherfucker.
You okay, man?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Did you get hurt? Is that blood on you?
Yeah.
From where?
From
Your
people's
hand.
faces.
The Sockjig Sneaker Podcast will soon be hosted by Jacques Slade. Episode 10 of the Sockjig Sneaker Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I am Sockjig, and you can follow me on Twitter at Sockjig and on Instagram as well. First off, thank you to everyone who bought the We in a Bandemic t-shirt and socks. You know, it's still wild to me that I can consistently sell product to people who follow me on Twitter or listen to this podcast, you know, because I only have, a small number of people that follow me on Twitter. And I know there's brands out there or, just influencers out there that have 100,000 followers that probably couldn't do the same. So, I truly thank you. I'm glad you guys like the product and you guys buy it. It means a lot to me. The release went pretty well. When I was making the thing, I was a little bit nervous about before introducing it. I wasn't sure how people were going to take it. I thought there was a lot of backlash about scalpers and stuff like that in the news. Yeah, like I talked about in the podcast I did about making the socks, you kind of have to force yourself to believe in yourself to go, no, I think this is going to work. As I said when I announced it, I had this idea back in November to, make a product and, maybe make a t-shirt for the first time to kind of commemorate some of the positive things that, some people went through in 2020. If you were the type that went out there and hustled and, like I said, started selling Nintendo Switches or pools and stuff. I might have sold a Nintendo Switch here and there or a PlayStation 5, but I wasn't buying, heating lamps and pools and stuff like that. But people went like crazy with that kind of stuff. So I had this idea, hey, let's kind of commemorate some of that. Just kind of taking the meme of the SpongeBob with the money and stuff and kind of making it a twist, making it on something that I think people would wear. And I always like the Knicks logo and the Knicks color, so that's how the idea came together. And I knew all along that it's a niche product for a niche group. I could make something that says, one to rock and one to stock, but that's just not something I would want to wear or want to buy myself. So, and like I said, I knew it wouldn't be for everyone. I know there's people out there that, for example, only wear black socks. And people have told me the opposite. I only wear white socks. I can't wear black socks. Or you could be a Nets fan and hate the Knicks. So you're not going to buy anything that has Knicks colors on it. Or, like I said, you could hate resellers and scalpers. So that's also a good reason. That's also a good reason not to buy this. If you missed out and would like it to restock, reach out to me. Let me know. I could possibly do a restock down the line. Most of the product did sell out in like the first 10 minutes or so. And then there was probably 5 or 6 socks left and 2 size small and 2 size medium t-shirts that kind of sat for most of the afternoon. And, eventually it did sell as well. But as I said in that other podcast about making the socks, I'm okay with stuff sitting all day kind of thing. As for the rest of this podcast, a lot of it I recorded last week. And the sound was bad in some spots, so I had to go back and re-record. And then it was just a matter of finding time to re-record. So if it sounds patchy and kind of, taped together, that's exactly why it does. In this podcast, I talk about Nike Dunks and how they're supposed to be the year of the dunk. I talk about sneaker Twitter and venture capital funding, how there's a couple companies that had venture capital funding announced, and I go in about those companies like SoleSavy and talk about a future where there could be possibly digital retailers only, stores that are only online and do not have brick and mortar shops, and how Nike would treat them. And I start going on about Cookgroups and stuff like that again. There's a part where I was kind of talking about sneaker culture where I kind of go all over the place. I don't know if I tied it all together properly how I had it in my mind, but instead of scrapping the whole episode, I just kind of patched it together and put it out there. So I still have more thoughts about sneaker culture and stuff like that, and I might kind of gather them and record them for another future podcast. But first up, pickups. and what's on feet. On feet for most of this month has been the Awake Asics Gel Kayano 5 360. Those are the silver and greenish pair. I love that pair. They are true to size. I had a 12 and a 12 and a half. The 12 and a half was a little bit too loose, so I did get rid of that one. And those ones have kind of shot up in price. They're probably like 500-600 now, where they were hovering at about 250-ish or 300-ish for a long time. I've still been wearing the Stash Spiridons and also the SoleSavy Bandemic. I posted a photo on my Instagram of the three. It's just three colorful sneakers that kind of look pretty good together. So I was kind of cycling between those for a few weeks. But for the last week or so, I undead stocked the Habibi Frame SBs. And those were a gift to me. So shout out to the plug who was able to give me a pair for free. This is probably the nicest pair I've ever got as a gift. And just to be clear, that was a gift from, a personal friend. That was not a gift from a brand or a seated pair or anything like that. I've never gotten an Under Armour or any seated pairs ever. And they shot up in price. They're probably like $1,000 now and that didn't take very long at all. Sometimes it's like 3-6 months later it will shoot up, and this I think shot up like a week later. It looks kind of like a Chicago one. I think that's probably why. For far away, it's red, white, and black swoosh. For pickups, really haven't picked up that much because not much has really released this month. Foot Locker Canada restocked some Jubilee 11s. I doubled up and picked up one of those. Union did a restock on a bunch of their Jordan tees and clothing. I already have most of the ones with the dunk on it and the hoodie, and so I got the ones with the arms outstretched. And I don't know, it's one of those ones where I'm like, am I really gonna wear this? So once I get in hand, I'll see it. I was able to cop the Noter dunks. Is it Notra or Noter? I don't know, either or. That was one of those releases where everyone was expecting the formula to hit, where Noter will go to password, update, and then you'll be switch to a new domain, and bots will be too slow to catch up. And that didn't exactly happen. It stayed on the same domain, but everything went well, at least for me. Mine was pretty simple. I went to the cream pair, I added a cart, I was in queue for about 4 minutes. I know that Noter is in Chicago, so the question wasn't a big deal. I saw people really tripped up on stuff like that, and I think it's good to filter out all those people, have like a minimum requirement to pass the test. If you don't know what a color an orange is, then maybe you don't deserve this shoe. So, and like I said, this kind of inverts the L. So you can't blame other people if you don't even know the question of where the store is or how to spell orange or anything like that. So for me, I added a cart. The queue was like 4 minutes, 3-4 minutes, and then just checked out. And then I saw afterwards that, it went pretty quickly. From what I saw, it didn't seem like they had 10,000-15,000. They probably might have had 5,000 or so, maybe half each. Usually when a color is an exclusive color to the store, that one is actually more in stock than the other one that's going to have a wider release. And yeah, lucked out on that one. Happy to get them. The story, when you first saw them, they're like, okay, what's going on here? It's just some hairy suede and big ass tag on it, on the one of the tongues. The weird pull tab on the back. But, it kind of makes sense with the workwear story that they have going on. And so, happy to get those. Can't wait to see them in hand. There's a bunch of other releases this month that I just skipped. The AJ1 Volt, I liked it, but, I just didn't want to chase that one. So you wake up, like I said before, Pacific time, everything's a 7 a.m. drop here. So sometimes it's just not worth it. Better to just sleep in. Same with this Pata New Balance. It's a nice shoe. I liked it. Pata usually New Balance usually only gives these places, these collabs, like maybe 1,000, 2,000 pairs. So, and that was 4 a.m. my time. On the East Coast, it's 7 a.m., which is doable. But 4 a.m. is like, nah, I just decided not to wake up at 4 a.m. for a potential L. So I saw the same thing, like the Noter site. They actually did the thing where they flipped to a different site, and the question was much harder. It was like the answer was from the description of, like, which city is the factory that makes these shoes from. So the New Balance heads that are up and up on the 991 would have known that, or had done research on it, and others wouldn't have. So from what I saw, no bots worked on that one, or didn't on Noter either. So good job Shopify on that. But what I will say is, for both the Noter site drop, even the recent ones were concepts, and for the Turduncan and the Bodega Dunk as well, is there is this formula now of what works for a hype collab drop. And so we've seen numbers for vary between 6,000, let's say, for Noter, and 15,000, let's say, for concepts or Bodega. And Union one might have had 50,000, but there's clothing and all kinds of other stuff there, so it was a bit higher. So what I would like to see is more stock for these types of releases. You have a release method that is working now, and it'd be great if we can get more of these pairs into the hands of the public. And so they're just kind of artificially limited for for their own, Nike's own reasons. So you can bump the numbers up for some of these drops, I think, and not do too much damage. The people have gone through enough pain where I think it'd probably be a good idea to reward some of them for actually, for wanting the pairs, and giving them a decent chance at getting them. So, it's great that, these drops have been fair and haven't been gone into, a botter's hands. It's all been gone to the public, but just not enough pairs have yet. I'd love to see a drop, say a future Union drop that had 100,000 pairs, let's say. And, these Shopify and these sites have shown that they can support something like that. Shipping might take a while, but it is doable. But, that's totally up to Nike. They're the ones who control this, and, they're the ones responsible for sneakers trending every Saturday morning. But, the other side is, we saw what happened with Undefeated 97 when something with a lot of stock did drop. And now, like, even the Militia Green, some of those sizes go for under retail. The black ones, the Black Volt ones, are already going for retail almost immediately. This is the game that Nike is playing. They don't want to see that, so they don't want to do that with Jordan 1s, maybe not, these SP Dunks, for example. So they artificially limit it for a reason. So, Nike basically shrugs and tells you every week that the game is the game. All right, first topic I want to talk about is how it's supposed to be the year of the dunk, the SP Dunk, that is, the sportswear one, not the SB skateboarding one. So there's a lot of SP Dunks scheduled for this year, like 40 plus I've seen. But, you're looking at highs, lows, women's exclusive, even GS sizes. And you're going to see a wide range of, restocks of university colorways like, UNLV and, maybe Georgetown, hopefully. Some are supposed to release, like 5 or 6 are supposed to release in January, but it looks like they've all been delayed till March, at least in North America. I know they dropped in a few spots in Europe. But it seems like, Nike has kind of made this, their version of how Yeezy said, anyone can get a Yeezy eventually. Nike, after playing the game of giving each store maybe 18 pairs of Dunks, now they're like, all right, let's give them 80 pairs, and let's give it to the tier 3 places instead of just the tier 1 or tier 0 places only. But first up was the Dunk ID release on Nike US, and then later, a couple weeks later, on Nike Canada and Europe and all the other regions. And I had called this before the drop, that this is kind of going further on what I had tweeted earlier, that I just foresaw problems that Nike, a company that just treats sneakerheads so, I'm being facetious here. Nike, a company that treats sneakerheads so generously by just inundating them with stock and W's, is all of a sudden just going to make a ton of Dunks for everyone. And I said, I don't believe it. And you saw how it went on this release. People were expecting to get, 5 or 6. People spent a whole week making their colorways, and I just saw the problems coming. And because Nike has shown me that, they don't care about fixing their site. They, after the CPFM Air Force Ones last year, but if you didn't see, for US, people who had saved their designs could not load those designs, and basically the only way to check out was just hammer the site and keep trying. You'd get an error and just keep trying, and maybe you got a checkout, maybe you didn't. In Canada and probably in Europe and stuff, it was like it was supposed to release at a set time, and when you saw the set time, the sizes all appeared. You added to cart. That part they got right. Your saved ones showed up. They didn't just disappear like they did in the US. But once you got to cart and hit checkout, it just said failed to make a reservation in the system. The way Nike is that's it. The release is over. There's no spokesperson that is going to make a statement. There's no face to the company for sneakers, very much on purpose. Adidas had Wex, and Wex, that wasn't even Wex's job. He was basically just the guy who talked with, Pharrell and Kanye and them, and built the influencer part as an executive. Like, his job was not to be the face of Adidas. And he, probably unfairly got that role. But back to the site, like I said, Nike's never really shown that they care that much about fixing their site or loading a ton of stock just for everyone. Even on Nike ID, where on pre-orders, you obviously have the ability to make a lot of pre-orders if you wanted to. It's just a matter of, it comes into like technical terms of like, do I have enough of the same leather from the same factory to have 10,000 Dunk IDs, or do I only have enough for 2,000? Do I have enough suede and all that kind of stuff? Just the raw materials and the ability to, and the numbers that come from the number of raw materials that you have. I have it on my future to-do list to talk about pre-orders and why Nike doesn't do them, especially when it comes to like Kobe's and things like that. But I'll save that for a future episode. The last note I'll say about that part is there's a Nike bot called Dragon AIO. It's one of these bots that sells for up to $20,000, if you can believe that. Its biggest thing is that it can just clean up Nike. I'm not sure how well it does on sneakers per se, but other items on Nike, even straight from the back end, that it can buy out. And I'm pretty sure I saw a bunch of checkouts for even the Dunk IDs with using Dragon. So I'm sure whoever the users, there's probably only like a dozen people that actually have this bot. I don't know. I doubt it's hundreds of people. But whoever they are, I'm sure they have checkouts. So that was the first drop. It's already a disaster. So how will it go for the rest of the stores that get these? The tier 2s, the tier 3s. Are they going to get 100 pairs each? Obviously it would be great if, every store had a whole bunch and there's lots of winners. But, to use a metaphor, imagine a piece of toast and you have some butter on it. Are you going to just slather the butter all over the toast with a ton of stock everywhere across the country? Or are you going to put a little piece of butter, a little pat of butter, is it? Yeah, I think it's pat of butter. Are you going to put a little pat of butter in the corner and then just like with your butter knife scrape it across and, very sparingly have it go across the piece of toast, but only a little bit on, each bite? That's usually what they do with Jordan 1s. And my guess is they'll probably do the same thing here. They'll go across the store, across the country, give it to places like City Blue and all these, Noble in New York and stuff like that. All these smaller places, but, each one still gets 30 pairs, 40 pairs, I don't know, whatever the bare minimum is. In that case, you're back to the days of 2020 where a store got 20 dunks and had to raffle them. But what about big places? The question is, can you walk into a Foot Locker later this year and buy one off the wall? I honestly don't think you can, probably at least for the first 8 months, especially. Maybe later in October or something, there's a woman's high in a bad color that sits a bit. And like I had said in my Twitter post as well too, the good correlation is, can you buy an Air Jordan 1 low right now? There's this awful looking UNC black one. It's like a black toe with UNC color, and it looks awful, but as soon as it goes up on sites, it's usually gone. So it's at least available, and if you're you got your Twitter notifications on or your Cook Group alert goes up, you can probably buy them. but can Joe Average walk into his Foot Locker store and see it on the wall any day of the week? I don't think so. And the correlation between the Jordan 1 and the Dunk is, super close. They obviously have this kind of a shared history. The Dunk itself has its own history, especially with colleges and the schools and how that's gone. And so when you talk about the recipe for what a recipe for resale is, it's usually cheap retail, very wearable, looks good, a shoe with history. And did I say cheap retail? Because that's a huge, obviously it's way easier to resell a shoe that costs $100 than it is to resell a shoe that costs, $220. And if anything, if these shoes sit on a Foot Locker wall, that Foot Locker manager, they have their quotas and numbers, sales targets that they have to hit. They're hitting up their bulk buyers. They're saying, hey, look what I have on the wall here. Take them. And so even if these shoes end up being where, just like how these Iowa high Dunks became the Wu-Tang ones, where they were gone instantly as soon as they went up on sites, but they don't resell for a ton. The same thing can happen with Dunks this year, especially on the bad colorways, let's say. And you also have to look at, what resellers did in 2020. They mostly made money on Jordan mids and lows, especially GS sizes. And so when Dunks are coming out this year in high stock across the board, I'm sure they're going to do the same thing. In 2020, people were buying up and holding because that was the way to go. Spoiler alert, if you wanted to make money, you bought a good Jordan 1 mid or, a low and you held them. But it wasn't an easy game. You could have held the Chicago 1 mid and made a ton of money. You could have bought them up easily and, held them till now and started selling them at a higher price. Or if you bought those reverse bred lows, your thinking was that it's a bred colorway, you're still sitting on them because they're still retail-ish. But if you see a store that restocks them, they fly instantly because people they don't just sit on I've seen Canadian shops in the last week restock them, and they're not available later in the day. They're not even available an hour later. They're usually just gone. So, I see the same thing coming with the Dunk. I see the speculators going in, especially if it's sitting, hey, let's just buy up. The shoe's so cheap, we can buy a ton of them. Especially something like a UNLV shoe, which I don't think will sit. Even like the black-white Dunk Low, which won't sit. And I've heard stories that one will probably restock a few times and make it more GR. But even so, that shoe is nice, and it's highly wearable. The black-white Jordan 1 high hasn't restocked since 2014, so it is very much a comparable in that case. So overall, year of the Dunk, the Dunk ID already told you what you need to believe, and in the relationship you have with Nike, you need to believe what they show you and how they treat you. It's almost like a battered spouse kind of thing going on with the abusive relationship. Nike will change. I'm going to get 5 or 6 Dunk IDs. It's going to be awesome. And then when it doesn't, you're just like, what? It didn't change? And you just can't believe it. And so that's where I was trying to prepare you. And that's what this whole segment was about. Don't believe it. If you really try, you can probably get them, but I just don't think you can walk into a Foot Locker on a Wednesday afternoon and, buy a UNLV or a black-white off the wall. But, I could be wrong. I would like to see it. It's a nice shoe. People wearing these kind of types of shoes is what moves the culture forward. It's not a bunch of speculators and resellers. And that kind of leads to my next topic. Okay, next up, I wanted to talk about sneaker Twitter and getting funding from venture capital companies. So back in December, the first one that was in the news was a company called Safe-T acquired Chai Cooked LLC proxy company. I think it was undisclosed how much they paid for them, but from what I saw in the press release, it said that this proxy company made like 1.1 million in the last 10 months or so. During a pandemic year, that's pretty good. And then another one also from December was Aglet app got 4.5 million in venture capital. And if you've never heard of Aglet app, it's an app where it's basically a combination of Pokemon Go plus sneakers, where you can walk around and the more you walk, you can unlock digital sneakers. So I think the premise is If you didn't get that off-white, you can own it digitally. But, the concept is literally you own a digital sneaker. And even then, if you open the app, you can't just go buy an off-white. You're supposed to, walk around the block and kind of level up to the point where you can buy it. And just explain this premise. This is just totally not for me. But, someone out there is hearing this and saying, wow, that sounds awesome. Good luck to them. I personally think it's a waste of money. But that pitch to investors, I totally understand. It's Pokemon Go plus sneakers. That's the elevator pitch, I'm assuming. And then just last week or so, it was announced that SoleSavy got $2 million in venture capital. If you haven't heard of SoleSavy, I've mentioned it a few times in the past. I've even been on their podcast and stuff. Full disclosure, I do know the owner, but I'm not invested in this or anything like that. So if you don't know what it is, it's essentially a cook group, as the easiest way to describe it, that's marketed towards the common sneakerhead, the common person, instead of to resellers and botters. It's the same thing. You get monitors, you get inside information, you get guides, you get, release information, all that kind of stuff, raffle information. Try explaining an add to cart link from a monitor to your friend who doesn't know anything about sneakers, and that's kind of what they would do. For one, kudos to them for even getting funding. The pitch for this must have been really hard. I know a little bit about venture capital and what they look for, and community-based commerce is not exactly something that moves the needle for venture capital. So this must have been a lot of work, and that's awesome that they were able to get this. But some of the chatter I saw on Twitter was, oh, what the hell's going on? My cook group should get $2 million in venture capital. The first question is, why does your cook group need venture capital? It's like, if you had $2 million right now, what would you do? What would you spend it on? Would you spend it on what you're currently doing? Meaning you'd spend it on proxies and stuff like that. And, paying 15-year-olds as your moderators. Man, shoes huncho, I'm talking to you. Or would you be like, I would invest it into sneakers, a sneaker hedge fund. I would buy every Jordan 1 mid Chicago that I can and then show, my investors the profits later. Forget about the reverse bread one lows, though. Don't tell them about that. But you can relax. You got your tweets off and that was all good. But this is not going to happen because there's a difference between black hat investing and white hat investing. Your cook group and your bot that you want venture capital for is considered black hat. You're not doing anything that's on the up and up that the venture capital companies would want to invest in. Whereas a bot automates a checkout. They're in a constant cat and mouse game. Nike has changed how we can monitor their site, so I got to tweak it now. If your bot has to tweak how Footsites releases this week and that week, it's never a consistent thing. An investor cannot say, will this work 8 months from now? Think of how many bots that have come and go. And, Cyber is an example of one that has always worked. And, think of Palace Bot. You also realize how kind of young everyone on the timeline is when they talk about this kind of stuff. I'm not even sure they understand about venture capital and where the money goes to. I think the money it was kind of thought that it just goes to their pockets, and it doesn't. It's supposed to go to the company and kind of furthering the company. But back to the cat and mouse game. One of the developers for Scout, which is an online site, keep track of your sales and even helps you do your inventory and tax stuff. It's a really good app, and I might review it in a future episode as well. But he had one of the developers there had a series of tweets where he's looking for developers. And one of the things he said in his thread was, your work here will be meaningful. He said most sneaker Twitter work is reactive, not proactive. And he views the same thing. You're in a never-ending cat and mouse game where you have to make engineering and product sacrifices to loophole around a site's security. No amount of great engineering will ever allow your product to be stable and self-sufficient. He goes, whereas at Scout, the overall experience of your product isn't tied to an external service like Foot Locker or Adyen or whatever. All your work goes towards building a beautiful and functional product that won't disappear overnight. Those two tweets especially I just thought perfectly summarized what it's like being a developer on a product and why overall in long term, I've kind of said this before too, most anti-bot developers will win long term because they have a 9 to 5 job, check in, check out, vacation time. They're proactive. They're deciding what happens. Whereas a bot dev has a much more frustrating experience and, has to figure out what changes were made on Foot Locker this week and what changes Shopify, for example, made. And you not only have people in the Discord asking what happened, what went wrong, why didn't it work, but also some of these guys want extra service because they paid $10,000 for this bot or $5,000 or whatever the market price is. Back to Cookgroups and stuff. The other comment that I said was a lot of these places are toxic. There's lots of inside jokes. There's a lot of flaming of beginners or people who ask basic questions and stuff like that. You never will grow your cook group, for example, by having something like that. And it's fine to be in an advanced place that has really good service and really good monitors, and you only say want 500 members anyways. And, some may come and go and you can restock and it's totally fine. That is a good product. There's tons of groups like that out there. And if that's all they want, it's good. You don't need venture capital. Whatever money you're making is awesome. If you're in this cat and mouse game of constantly tweaking these monitors and it's worthwhile, go right ahead. And I forgot to mention it earlier, but Scout app was able to get venture capital funding as well. Well deserved. Those guys are good developers. That is a very professional tool. And, this is just another example of a white hat company getting funding, whereas a black hat company would not. All right, back to SoleSavy. I want to talk about them and how they work a little bit. First off, full disclosure, I do know the owner and I am in the Canadian version of the SoleSavy group. I think they have several of them and I'm in a lot of groups and I don't always have the time to pay attention in every single one. It's weird to say, but it's kind of like Netflix when you can watch any movie on there. You don't want to watch any kind of, you just start browsing and browsing. In terms of SoleSavy, their strengths, they do a lot of stuff right. Imagine a cook group where everyone is friendly and, the staff is very knowledgeable and, they do have all the other stuff like exclusive information, guides. One of the most important things is, someone keeping you up to date of what's releasing each week and which raffle just went live. So having one of those channels where that is always kept up to date is almost always worth the price of admission itself. And they do that kind of stuff really well. And they do other stuff that, not, some groups may do, but, not a lot do, like, in live person events back when that was a thing that you could do, or giveaways. And overall, it's just it's a positive community, which is a very much their strength. And it's full of, collectors and sneakerheads because their mantra and number one rule is no professional resellers. In terms of weaknesses, their monitors aren't as good as other places I've seen, but they probably use GoOp or Zephyr or something like that tons of other groups use, so they're probably on par with most of these groups. And that's one of those things that can be swapped in and out. So oftentimes the monitor itself is not always the best feature of the group you're in, even if that is the most publicly advertised or marketed feature. And so being anti-resell and just being, mostly 100% manual, no matter what, what they say in an interview to Highsnobiety or something, they're not going to be as competitive as a bot, some other monitor that has a bot with quick task. Usually I just gloss over this kind of stuff, but quick task is when you can just click a button and it sends that size that just restocked right to your bot, and your bot will automatically check it out. And, a pop-up might come up and you might have to do a captcha or something. If Haven restocks some Sakai Vapor Waffle, most likely that's going to someone using SoleAIO or Balco or whatever, instead of, one person manually trying to hit the 3 pairs that restocked. And overall, the general one of all groups really is, they're only as useful as the amount of time you have to put into it. So if you can sit at a Slack all day versus working a job outdoors, you're going to, of course, get more out of it if you can sit at Slack all day. And that's why a lot of these cook groups and stuff are full of full-time resellers, because that's their job, what they do. So the group is first off, the group is very anti-resell. And obviously they have the right to set the terms and kick people who violate these terms. Totally fine to have that stance, because there's way more people to market to who are not botters and resellers than there are those people. So, everyone who comments on a nice Kicks post or follows Soul Links, for example, is a potential member. But when you have rules that moderate behavior, and you see this in Facebook groups that have a lot of rules as well, to get Wikipedia article again, it's called a Panopticon. The Panopticon is a prison design system where a single security guard in a tower in the middle, and all the prison is designed around that tower. So a single security guard from that tower can watch all the inmates and tell what they are doing, but they cannot tell if they are being watched. Even though it's physically impossible for that single guard to observe all the inmates all at once, the fact that the inmates know that they could be watched at any time motivates them to act a certain way, as if they are being watched at all times. So, the metaphor there, of course, it doesn't mean that you're in a prison or anything like that. But the metaphor is you have to moderate your behavior as if you are being watched. If you decide to resell something, is this against the terms of what I have already agreed to? And they've already said things like, if you have a pair, go resell it. Just don't do it here. And that's fine. Don't go in this group and try to resell it. The goal is to get these full-time resellers out of this group. If you have your own dedicated Instagram and stuff to reselling, then you could be kicked, and because it's a violation of their terms and services. The point I'm trying to make is, if you do not want to be watched, if you do not want to have other people checking in on your Instagram and say reporting you and you getting kicked or something, then this might not be for you. But conversely, on the other hand, if you have no intention of reselling or getting into this world at all, and you got nothing to hide, for example, then it's totally fine for you. But, privacy reasons itself, I could see why someone would not be interested in a group like this, just for those kind of reasons. Especially if you're borderline, and everyone has gone from flipping one shoe on StockX to all of a sudden flipping 3 shoes on StockX, and then next thing you know, you've got a size run in your basement, stuff like that. So if you foresee that is a life for you, then this group is probably not for you, and they don't want you either. So that's why I'm totally okay with this. But you gotta know what you're getting into when you sign up for something like this. And really, a lot of groups have a version of this where the most common one is, if you leak exclusive information from that group and you're caught, you will be kicked as well. And others in the group are encouraged to report that person, and that, or even incentivize where you could get a free month if you provide proof that someone is leaking. And you see this in Twitter all the time with call outs and stuff like that when someone is caught like this. So this is not an uncommon behavior, that when you join any of these types of groups, you agree to have your behavior moderated. That's just kind of how bigger communities work. And in this case, if you're not going to leak, it's not a big deal. It's only a big deal for the people who want to leak to other groups. But of course, every group does leak, and everyone has early kith links, and usually that's only coming from like one source. But magically, every single group has it on Saturday mornings or on Monday mornings before a Monday drop. So all these places can try as hard as they want to moderate behavior. You just can't moderate everyone's behavior. The other thing they talk about is that they have the ability to buy bulk pairs for retail and then sell for retail in their own store. So it's not always disclosed where they get these pairs from. For this example, I'm just going to assume they got it from a local boutique. Obviously, if a shoe is sitting online already, they don't need to do this, because the member can just go buy it from that store itself. Or if you bought up, a store stock of 380s, that's fine as well, because that store needs 380s and there's not that much demand for 380s. But what about everything else? What if they get 100 pairs of, say, Air Max 90 infrareds? They got them from the local boutique, and they're selling them to their members for retail. I'm using Air Max 90 as something that was kind of produced in larger quantities, has a history that, and people want it, and did still sell out, but, not exactly quickly. And this is where they kind of position themselves as they can help you get these types of pairs. So, but if I was just a local guy, previously I described a plumber who doesn't always have the time to be online in any Slack or Discord or anything, and I go to my local boutique at lunchtime and ask for Infrared 90s, but they're out of stock. But that same store may have given 100 pairs to this group. So it's essentially a backdoor, just like how any bulk buyer backdoors, even if the intent is not to resell it. That customer who just wanted a regular pair on his lunch break is not getting it, but it's also denying other, say, resellers from getting it. And how public are stores willing to be about what they did with their stock? No one talks about their stock. So then if they sold 100 pairs to SoleSavy, they're not going to say anything. That is one thing, but like in my example, I'm just assuming that they got it from a local boutique. Maybe they got it from somewhere else or some other region where these pairs were sitting and reallocated them. In that case, I guess it's totally fine. But no one knows. And, no one's going to be transparent about it, even if they're wearing the white hat. But SoleSavy has a podcast, and they said a couple things I thought were pretty interesting. They talked about their venture capital money and kind of what their plans are, and what they see as like what they would like to do as a paradigm shift of moving the culture forward and kind of a different way of thinking things. And they touched on becoming a digital retailer, selling pairs to members for retail, and the power of the community, the buying power of a community. So there's a couple things there I want to talk about. What they're getting kind of at is this future where they could be a digital retailer, where Nike and Adidas and brands like that would be selling shoes to SoleSavy so that they can sell it for retail. And the quote was, we can go to Nike and say we have 10,000, 20,000 members in North America or around the world. We can sell to them. We are the future boutique in your local neighborhood, just digital. So the interesting part was, we don't need to make 50% of the sneaker in profit. Just give us 20% off the retail price, and then we can afford to give it to members for free shipping. So the interesting part there was, they are not asking for, in this imagined future, they are not asking for 50% wholesale price. They are undercutting and saying, give us, just 20% off. And, would Nike do this? And is this what the ambitious, paradigm shift that they have in mind is undercutting every, brick and mortar retailer that gets that at 50% off and get it their wholesale price at 20% off the retail price. Nike has already shown that they don't really give a shit about mom and pops that are hard to manage. The mom and pop shop in Iowa that they've been supplying for 50 years, they would cut them off because it's more profitable to go direct to consumer. And, in this pandemic year, we've seen this kind of digital transformation of companies of what would normally have taken, say, 10, 15 years to now happen within 1 year, of companies going online, people working from home, and, this future of a more digital instead of brick and mortar. So, would Nike do this? Would they piss off every brick and mortar retailer that they currently have that's been selling all their junk product for years and maybe even can't even get a Jordan account yet, and then just go all digital and only give digital retailers of the future, 20% off? It's obviously it's a very ambitious goal, but that's the collateral damage. These retailers would be pissed off, these brick and mortar retailers, that, we've been selling your product for years and now you're selling it to these digital places. And, there's a store called The Better Generation. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's in Houston. It's supposed to be in Houston, Texas, but it's actually PJ Tucker's store. And I'm not sure if the actual retail brick and mortar store opened because of COVID. So if that store didn't open because of COVID, he's essentially a digital retailer right now. But he's also PJ Tucker. So, he has the relationships and the power to be able to get a Nike contract and a Jordan contract right away. So, it's interesting that we could definitely see Nike switch to digital retailers and giving them stock. But so many of these stores sell a lot of Nike's junk product. So would digital retailers be forced to sell a lot of junk product? I'm talking about just the regular tracksuits and stuff, the shoes that don't really sell that much. Could you tell a hype group, hey, here's a whole bunch of product, here's a whole bunch of tracksuits and stuff. Move all this and we'll give you some Jordan 1s. I'm not sure that's possible right now. Maybe in the future because of what we've seen with how much stuff has changed to digital this year. But right now, I just do not see Nike pissing off brick and mortar stores that have been selling their crap product for so long and then giving digital retailers only hype product. But in terms of buying power, of having a member, real sneakerhead buying power, Nike already kind of has that. They have hundreds of thousands of sneaker members and sneakers app members, and they have all their payment information. And every Saturday you see how badly they want the product when, sneakers app starts trending. And Nike seemingly doesn't care about their buying power or getting it into the hands of real sneakerheads. Sure, they fixed sneakers botting and it's way harder because of the filters. But even that, a side note, a bot called the shit bot actually does pretty well lately. So, but back to the main point. The main problem is Nike is not doubling their stock anytime soon across the board where something like this can happen. The real paradigm shift would be if stock on shoes wasn't artificially limited. And, only Nike can support that. But history has already shown that giving people what they want is bad for business, since they don't want it if they can get it. Adidas shows you that all the time with Ultra Boost. The last thing I had here was in the podcast and in the articles that came out about SoleSavy, it talked a lot about saving sneaker culture and how much StockX sucks. And, those are fine opinions to have. StockX does suck in a lot of ways, but, it's great in a lot of ways. Before, it was such a pain to get that old pair of shoes that you couldn't get. If you missed out on, say, MCA, Air Force Ones, were you going to get it from eBay? You would just forget about that shoe. Whereas now you have at least some level of trust that you could get an authentic pair. And, the other side of StockX is they sell a lot of shoes under retail. A ton of shoes that are full retail on a Foot Locker right now are under retail on StockX right now. If you wanted the undefeated 97s that I talked about last week, they said they were meant not to be resold. They're meant to be thrashed. Well, you can buy them all, but especially the Black Volt ones for under retail on StockX. But in terms of sneaker culture, this is not really a term I use a lot. If you've heard Corgi Shoe talk about this, he very strongly doesn't believe in it. The part I believe in is you can make friends and have close relationship with those friends, and that is what sneaker culture comes from. And obviously wearing the shoes. My stance is that brands don't move the culture. Nike didn't move the culture forward. The people wearing Nike did. Stash and Futura and all these guys that took Nikes and did stuff to them, those guys moved the culture forward. Nike gave them the product and they took it and did something with it. Looking fresh and wearing shoes moves the culture forward. Brands do not. And the final note there, brands aren't your friends. I always talk about this because I strongly believe in this. As soon as you stop paying, friendship ended with you. Now a new member who is paying is not my best friend. Okay, they love you as long as you're paying. But overall, SoleSavy is a good group to join. Like I said, if you don't bot or resell, and you have the time to sit around in front of a computer all day. Like I said, they do a lot of things right. And I think their biggest strength is their staff. They have an awesome staff there. And, they have these ambitious goals of, possibly becoming a digital retailer and this goal of saving sneaker culture. And that's what they can do with, the 2 million venture funding that they got. Even if I don't fully agree with, the saving sneaker culture stuff, but it works for great marketing, and it's the type of thing that will like bring members in. But like I said, you can wear the white hat all you want, but if your goal is to get a lot of pairs for a lot of people, that hat is probably more gray than white. Overall, any group that charges monthly membership is about buying and friends. Every group is going to promote buying. There's not that many services out there that is going to recommend that you take a break. Hey, you've been buying too much. Come back in a couple of months. No, you're paying monthly, stay monthly. These are all the reasons why you should stay. And I've said this a lot of times before. People stay because they want to hang out with friends. I've done it. I've been in lots of groups where I stuck around for a couple of months extra just because, I like the people there. And that's what basically everyone did in January, since there weren't that many releases anyways. But the real kind of topic of this podcast was supposed to be about how everything is dependent on one brand, and that's Nike. It's how much stock are they releasing and how are they releasing it? How are they getting it in the hands of real people? How are they going to fix sneakers? Will they make more stock? Or will they ruin it by making too much? But Nike's going to do what they're going to do because there's only one group of people who, have a ton of buying power that they truly care about. And that's their shareholders. All right, that's a good place to end. Thanks for listening to the Sockjig Sneaker Podcast. This has been episode 10. I'll catch you next time.